Today, Matt Walsh Show, the chaos in Los Angeles isn't just being driven by illegal immigrants. There are plenty of legal immigrants in the mix, too. We need to completely reframe the discussion around immigration. Illegal immigration is not the only problem, and we'll talk about that. Also, a major international pride event happened in D.C. a few days ago. The turnout was a third of what the organizers hoped for, and it's been repeatedly claimed that illegal immigrants in California actually aren't illegal because California originally belonged to Mexico. This reasoning is flawed in many different ways. It shows us yet again how the school system has totally failed to instill even the most basic understanding of history. We'll talk about all that and more today on the Matt Walsh Show. This Father's Day, give Dad a year of uncensored, ad-free truth. Get 40% off a Daily Wire Plus gift membership now at dailywire.com/gift with code DAD40. Grand Canyon University, a private Christian university in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, believes that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. GCU believes in equal opportunity, that the American dream starts with purpose. GCU equips you to serve others in ways that promotes human flourishing and creates a ripple effect of transformation for generations to come. By honoring your career calling, you impact your family, your friends, and your community. Change the world for good by putting others before yourself to glorify God. Whether your pursuit involves a bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree, GCU's online, on-campus, and hybrid learning environments are designed to help you achieve your unique academic, personal, and professional goals. With over 340 academic programs as of September 2024, GCU meets you where you are and provides a path to help you fulfill your dreams. The pursuit to serve others is yours. Let it flourish. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu. When you're talking about any political issue, whether it's about immigration or foreign policy or anything else, one of the hardest things to do is step back and recognize how the debate has been framed. This is part of the conversation that takes place before you get involved. The Overton window is set. Mainstream national news sources, politicians, various activist groups all work together to set the acceptable boundaries of dialogue. And they're very good at it. And you often don't even realize what they're doing, or at least you often don't realize what they're doing until some kind of catastrophic event takes place, the kind of event that makes their manipulation too obvious to ignore. Now, at this point, it's safe to say that the very sudden descent of Los Angeles into anarchy, or at least further anarchy, is one of those kinds of events. In particular, it's the kind of domestic disaster that suggests it's time to reassess how the debate over foreign migration has been framed over the past few decades. After all, neither political party warned us that U.S. immigration policy would turn major American cities into war zones in the span of just a couple of generations. That was not on the menu of possible outcomes that were ever presented to us. Instead, the people in charge were careful to silence any dissenters like Pat Buchanan. They were cast out as crazies, not to be trusted. And now, after all these years, we're finally seeing undeniable proof that actually people like Pat Buchanan were right about immigration policy all along. Our leaders were either inept or they were deliberately trying to destroy the United States. In either case, their framing is no longer relevant. Therefore, it's time for a new way of looking at foreign migration. You know, the old way of looking at it in almost every mainstream context has been to defend legal migration while acknowledging that illegal migration is undesirable. And in practice, it's always been a debate between pro-amnesty, pro-open borders Democrats on the one hand, who prefer to award legal status to foreign nationals, thus erasing their status as illegal aliens, and then pro-enforcement conservatives who want to deport as many criminal aliens as possible while maintaining legal migration, in theory. And those have been your two options. And at various points, both Democrats and Republicans have had the chance to enact their proposed policies along these lines. Republicans have historically failed to enact their supposed preferred policies, while Democrats have succeeded in enacting theirs, which is why Mexican flags are currently flying over Los Angeles. So the question naturally arises, what would a more successful immigration policy look like? What is the third option that we haven't pursued and that hasn't really been presented to us, at least in mainstream discourse? Well, it's actually pretty simple. Instead of simply targeting illegal aliens, the president should use his authority to immediately terminate all migration from the third world. We should start being extremely selective about the legal migration we allow, which means not allowing an unchecked flood of third world migration into this country. The United States has for far too long functioned as essentially a giant soup kitchen or a homeless shelter for the entire world. And it's not sustainable. We are out of space. We are out of money. We are out of resources. And as we watch what's happening in Los Angeles, we're also out of patience. Now, for one thing, the so-called legal immigration system as it currently exists is nothing more than a giant pipeline for fraud and scams. To just give one example, if you had to guess, here's a question. How many foreign nationals do you think abuse our student visa system to enter as legal migrants only to overstay their visas? What's the percentage? Well, it turns out that in the fiscal year 2023, the percentage was about 3.5%. And that might not seem like a large figure, but then you have to ask, are people from certain countries overstaying their visas at much higher rates than everybody else? That's the interesting question, and nobody seems to want to talk about it. And that's because the answer to that question tells you everything you need to know. According to DHS data, the third world is responsible for astronomical rates of visa overstays. 51% of student visas that were granted to the African nation of Chad, for example, ultimately resulted in criminal overstays. So did 24% of student visas awarded to citizens of Haiti, 21% of student visas awarded to citizens of Venezuela, 36% of student visas awarded to citizens of Somalia. Keep in mind, again, that the overall rate is 3.5%. Now, in any other context, nobody would tolerate numbers like this. Imagine you ran like a small business and 36% of the time you relied on a contractor for some important service. They'd send a deadbeat to your property who refused to leave. I mean, you'd immediately stop dealing with that contractor, obviously. You'd find some other company to do business with. We're not talking about one or two bad outcomes here. We're talking about systemic fraud. And by the way, it's not like student visas are the exception. Every kind of visa is abused by the third world every single year in large number. In the fiscal year 2022, 62% of migrants from Burma on a business or pleasure visa managed to stay in this country for too long. So did 44% of Venezuelans, 18% of Somalians, 28% of Syrians, and 20% of Kenyans. Meanwhile, for comparison, the visa overstay rate on business or pleasure visas from developed countries like United Kingdom, Sweden, Switzerland, South Korea, Taiwan, Greece, France, and Germany were all less than 1%. Now, I'll give you 10 guesses to figure out what could possibly explain this disparity. Although, of course, as countries like UK and Germany transform into the third world, we can expect that the disparity will probably decrease year after year. But in any case, anybody with common sense who looks at these numbers would understand immediately that migration from third world countries, whether you call it legal or not, needs to be discontinued. The most dysfunctional countries on the planet, which obviously offer nothing to the U.S. because they aren't even able to care for themselves, are the ones that are clearly taking advantage of us. They don't respect the rule of law. They don't respect our customs or even our language. There are very good reasons why we don't want third world dysfunction in this country. And it doesn't matter whether or not they wait in line or take a citizenship test. That's not the most important factor. Their level of interest in our country doesn't really matter. What matters is whether these people are, on balance, coming here to contribute to our country or take from it. And the answer is usually the latter. We are a country. We are not a giant bag of goodies that they give to children at the end of a birthday party. We're not an enormous prize counter at an arcade where all the prizes are free. We cannot afford to provide and provide and provide and provide to everyone else all across the world indefinitely. We just can't do this anymore. Our cities are increasingly descending into chaos that mirrors the third world because we have imported that chaos into our country, and we have to stop. It's just that simple. Now, just to underscore the importance of reframing the migration debate, take a look at what's happened to Canada in just the past half decade. This chart shows net international migration in the country from the 1950s to the present. And as you can see in the chart, for most of Canada's history, they had migration under control, relatively speaking. And then in just a matter of 4 years, all of a sudden, they're completely overwhelmed. And guess what? This surge was not the result of illegal immigration. hordes of immigrants didn't set out on pontoon boats and storm the beaches of Newfoundland. Instead, they just applied for asylum, the legal way. Never mind the fact that there's no legitimate reason for most of these people to seek asylum. They simply requested asylum in unprecedented numbers, and Canada's government went along with it. The door's wide open. Canada doesn't even run criminal background checks on applicants for most visas. While, in fact, if these immigrants need asylum at all, often they need asylum from law enforcement in their own countries, which is why they're coming here, or coming to Canada in this case. And this is a point that the Foreign Affairs Minister of India made himself publicly a few months ago. Even he's looking at Canada and wondering what the hell they're doing. And he warned that they are importing a lot of criminals from his country with no vetting whatsoever. Watch.
Number of gangland people, number of people with organized crime links from Punjab have been made welcome in Canada. We have been telling Canada, saying, look, these are wanted criminals from India. You have given them visas. They have come, many of them, in false documentation. And yet you allow them to live there. If you decide to import for political purposes people with very dubious, actually very negative background, there will be issues. They have, in some cases, created problems in their own country as a result of their own policies.
Now, on the one hand, you'd think that the Foreign Affairs Minister of India would be grateful that Canada is taking gang members and criminals off their hands. I wish we could send our criminals to Canada. That would be convenient and kind of funny. But apparently there's some kind of ongoing diplomatic feud between India and Canada involving assassinations and Sikh separatists, which I won't pretend to know anything about or care about. I mean, after all, part of the appeal of controlling your borders is that you don't have to worry about foreign feuds that don't concern you. But when you import millions of people from foreign lands, their conflicts become your conflicts. And Canada is now dealing with that reality, even as the quality of life in Canada declines year after year. And the point of this example in Canada is that, again, you can't solve the immigration problem just by making all of the immigration legal. As the Foreign Affairs Minister in India pointed out, you can legally accept the wrong people into your country. Now, we like to talk about immigration like it's all the same, right? But it isn't. And you're not allowed to point this stuff out, but there is a distinct difference between immigration from, say, Somalia and immigration from, say, Italy or Ireland. One of the big differences is that Italian and Irish immigrants have contributed to this country and helped to build it in ways that Somali immigrants simply never have. That is a historical reality that can't be denied. But in the present, unchecked Somali immigration has brought increased crime, increased violence, and huge rates of fraud to every community that's had to cope with it. This, again, cannot be denied. It is a simple fact. And the question is whether we are ever going to acknowledge that fact and do anything about it, or if we're going to continue acting like Somalis have some kind of cosmic entitlement written in the stars to come to our country whenever and however they please. Now things have gotten so bad that even our elected leaders in this country are not only not loyal to the U.S., but in some cases aren't even in the country legally. A state lawmaker in Minnesota named Coley Vang Her, who's from Vietnam, just admitted that she's living in this country illegally. And she's proud of it, apparently. Watch.
Because his mother had died. My father, as the one processing the paperwork, put my grandmother down as his mother. And so I am illegal in this country. My parents are illegal here in this country.
Now, there is no excuse for why this person isn't already on a plane back to Vietnam or Guantanamo Bay. I mean, if we're going to measure how serious the Trump administration is about enforcing immigration law, this woman's status is a pretty good bellwether. Here you have a confession from some dopey politician who's drawing a salary from taxpayers and creating nothing of value in return. So let's start with her. And then when she's deported, we could shut down all immigration from Vietnam, where, incidentally, they overstay their visas at around twice the rate of the average country. Now, this is not rocket science. You can look at the quality of the migrants coming from certain countries. You can look at the quality of those countries, the state of those countries, and you can ask yourself, you can do the logical, sane, fair thing and ask yourself, well, do we want that here? Here's all this dysfunction, all the terrible things happening in that country. Do we want to bring that into our country or not? Democrats will pretend to be outraged by rhetoric like this, but of course they use it against white people all the time. I mean, even when it makes no sense, they're happy to claim out loud that white people are the real third world migrants. Here, for example, is a Minnesota lawmaker named Lee Fink. Fink is a man who's claiming to be a woman. And in case you're wondering, elected officials in Minnesota apparently had a deranged meeting about immigration enforcement yesterday, probably because they're trying to inspire riots in their state as well. They're looking longingly at Los Angeles and feeling sort of envious, and they'd love to see some of that happening in Minneapolis, which maybe it will start soon enough. But in any event, here's Lee Fink. Listen.
We have worked so hard to become a magnet for people from foreign countries. We are desperate to be a magnet for people from foreign countries. Do you want to solve your labor shortages? Do you want to grow the economy? Do you want to see more businesses created that develop the future of the Minnesota's communities? Do you know who does that work? It ain't white people from the U.S. I am sorry, our track record on building new things in this country, it ain't whites.
Yeah, what have white people ever built? You know, besides space shuttles, cars, the steam engine, the printing press, the telescope, computers, telephones, St. Peter's Basilica, Notre Dame, infrastructure that saved millions of people globally, especially in Africa and Asia, the Magna Carta, the Constitution, Western civilization itself. Other than all that, what exactly have white people done? You know, the Somalis, they invented a spongy bread called mufo, and we just can't compare to that. We should stop trying. Now, it's not an accident that this same lawmaker also proposed a bill that would make it illegal to discriminate against sex offenders who target children. It's also not an accident that every single argument from the left that's intended to justify these riots in the end simply demonstrates why we need to suspend third world migration entirely. To give one more example, watch LA Mayor Karen Bass explain that the riots only occurred because the Trump administration dared to enforce federal immigration law. And apparently, that's supposed to excuse the violence. You enforce the law. How dare you? And then for good measure, Bass explains that the riots are mostly peaceful as explosions are visible on the screen right next to her. Watch.
I just have to say that if you dial back time and go to Friday, if immigration raids had not happened here, we would not have the disorder that went on last night. I will tell you that it is peaceful now, but we do not know where and when the next raids will be. That is the concern, because people in the city have a rapid response network. If they see ICE, they go out and they protest. And so it's just a recipe for pandemonium that is completely unnecessary. Nothing was happening here. Los Angeles was peaceful before Friday.
Do you think the National Guard is needed now?
No, I don't think the National Guard is needed now. Things in L.A. are calm. I will tell you that I'm saddened by the extent of the vandalism in the form of graffiti all through the downtown area. But it is important for people to know that even in downtown, this is isolated to a few streets. This is not citywide civil unrest taking place in Los Angeles.
This is becoming something of a staple of these LA riots. It happened at least 3 times now. They claim the riots are peaceful, even as everyone can see the truth directly next to them. And that's a pretty good sign that Democrats are struggling with their messaging, to say the least. They know they can't condemn the violence and take steps to stop it because the rioters are all Democrat voters. So instead, we're left with incoherence. Gavin Newsom is out there begging for Trump to arrest him because otherwise, precisely nobody is sympathetic to his position. Admittedly, some Democrats are more incoherent than others. Here, for example, is the president of the National Education Association, the largest teachers union in the country. They represent public school teachers and faculty all across the country. So you'd expect, or hope at least, that the president of the union would be maybe stable and well-spoken in public. But yesterday, she opened her mouth and revealed that, alas, she is neither of those things. Watch.
We the people! We the people! We the people! Yeah! All of us have that right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of justice!
You know, if there's any upside to these riots, it's helping to expose people like this. They just can't help themselves. The insurrection that's underway in Los Angeles has made it very clear once again that today's Democrats are the single most incompetent political party that this country has ever seen, hands down. But we've known that already for quite some time. And more importantly, the insurrection has also made it clear that the existing framework of the immigration debate simply is not working. The idea that we have some kind of obligation to allow anyone into this country who wants to come is absurd. No other nation on earth outside of the Western world operates this way or is expected to operate this way. Non-Western countries tend to be very choosy about who they allow in. As well they should be. That's their right. It's in the interest of their own self-preservation, which should be the top interest of their leaders. For example, India just recently revoked all visas issued to all Pakistani nationals in their country. And there hasn't been much global outcry over this, and there shouldn't be. India has every right to revoke visas to whatever group they choose. It's their country. They can decide who's there. They don't even know an explanation. If they say, well, we don't want you here, well, that's it. It's their country, not yours. Get out. And revoking visas for Pakistanis, given the state of affairs between those two nations, obviously makes a lot of sense. But again, even if it didn't make sense to us, it still would be none of our business. It's their country. It's just like your house. You don't have to give, if somebody's a guest in your house and you tell them to leave, you don't have to convince them that they have a good reason to ask you to leave. They told you to leave. Get the hell out. That's it. I could have any reason or no reason. Indian leaders have a responsibility to protect Indian citizens, not Pakistani citizens. And that's the kind of thing that we all intuitively understand, provided that it's a country with a non-white majority. But for Western countries with white majorities, especially the United States, we're expected to prioritize the well-being of foreign nationals over the well-being of our own people, our own families. And that is the only possible reason why we would allow unfettered migration from the third world countries, from the third world in the first place. I mean, we obviously aren't doing that for our own sake. Okay, despite what any leftist will claim about all the great benefits of importing the third world, they don't believe that. That's not really why they want to do it. Like, no one actually thinks that our country is stronger with tens of millions of third world immigrants than it would be otherwise. No one really thinks that. My own children don't benefit from importing the third world into our country, but the children of third world migrants do benefit. Well, guess what? I care more about my kids than theirs. And my government should care more about my kids than theirs also. I'll say that again, just to be clear. My government should care more about me and my children than about foreign nationals and their children. And if that sentiment shocks or scandalizes you, that is a good sign that your mind is hopelessly deluded by left-wing open borders propaganda to the point that you have become deranged. Because what I'm talking about, again, is basic self-preservation, basic national preservation. Every other country outside of the West functions this way instinctively and without a second thought. And so should we. But we haven't. And it's led to many terrible outcomes, including now open warfare in Los Angeles. And if we're being honest, that warfare is being waged by both legal and illegal immigrants from the third world. And that's why, if we want to prevent this warfare from spreading far beyond Los Angeles, both groups need to be told the same message. We're closed. Now let's get to our 5 headlines. While other brands chase trends and flood the market with endless options, Momentous takes a different approach. They rely on research and expert guidance to focus on what truly matters, mastering the fundamentals with unwavering consistency, then tailoring supplementation to your specific goals. Momentous sets a new benchmark in the supplement industry through their commitment to transparency and trust. Working alongside human performance specialists, they develop formulas that have earned both NSF and Informed Sport certification, providing the reliability that their 200-plus professional and collegiate athletic customers depend on. Momentous sources the highest-grade creatine monohydrate available, an essential supplement for both men and women seeking peak physical and cognitive performance. Rather than cutting corners, they prioritize ingredient quality over cost, ensuring that their products deliver exactly what is promised on the label. Their guiding philosophy, the Momentous Standard, has become the industry gold standard for quality and effectiveness. So what are you waiting for? Head to livemomentous.com and use code Walsh for 35% off your first subscription. That's code Walsh at livemomentous.com for 35% off your first subscription. The Post Millennial has a report about what was supposed to be the biggest Pride event in the world, and it didn't work out very well. Attendance was way down, and we're seeing this trend all over the place. Pride is collapsing, as we have chronicled on this show. But I want you to pay attention to the excuse that the LGBT activists are using for why this is happening, in particular for this event. Reading now from Post Millennial says, Sunday marked the final day of World Pride 2025, which was held in Washington, D.C. this year, the first time in the U.S. since 2019. Attendance numbers for the biannual festival, especially among international attendees, were reportedly down. Ashley Smith, board president of Capital Pride Alliance, told the Associated Press, international numbers were noticeably down, with some would-be attendees opting not to travel to the U.S. In protest of President Donald Trump's policies or over fears of harassment. Smith said that should disturb us and mobilize us. Heading into the final weekend, which included the Capitol Pride Parade, the BBC reported that event organizers dropped their estimated crowd size to around 1/3 of previous estimates. Ryan Boss, executive director of Capital Pride Alliance, told NPR, we anticipate bookings to be much higher at the time for World Pride and do know that the climate, the concern for folks internationally to travel to the United States is real. Montreal-based data analyst Alice Sarager, who's transgender, had initially planned on attending the event, but was concerned about traveling to the U.S. It is a risk to now come over, and especially as a trans woman, Sarager said. So attendance was about 30% of what they projected, which is hilarious and great. And what's the reason they give? Well, we heard about it in the article. I also have a report from something called Queer News Tonight. And I know you're thinking that, well, Queer News Tonight is what they call the evening programming block over on MSNBC, but actually it's a whole separate thing. This is a whole separate thing they do called Queer News Tonight. And they had a report on this issue as well. Let's watch that.
World Pride DC only meets 33% of projected attendance and revenue, mostly over concerns of fear. World Pride in Washington finished last night in the shadow of the Capitol and the White House. But largely, the news promised by World Pride organizers had disappointing results for attendance and revenues. World Pride may not even end up to be the largest LGBTQ event in America in 2025. In January, the event organizers had projected that the celebration, which coincides with the 50th anniversary of Washington's first Pride March, would attract 3 million visitors and contribute nearly $800 million to the local economy. But their expectations have now dropped to about 1/3 of their previous estimates, end quote. Destination DC, the official tourism organization for the city, reports that overall occupancy over the weekend in Washington, D.C. was down 3% compared to the same weekend in 2024. This means that the visibility of Pride may not have drawn the expected huge international visitors. The downturn of the entire city may suggest concerns related to World Pride may have kept even more tourists away. Washington's mayor, Muriel Bowser, discussed the concerns of the weekend when she acknowledged the visitors, saying, quote, feel scared that an environment is developing that is anti-LGBTQ, but we can't live in fear. We have to live our lives and be as best prepared as we can, end quote.
Now, I have to say, just a little bit of feedback, a little bit of, constructive criticism. Very poor performance by the news anchor there. She can barely read the prompter. I expected more from Queer News Tonight. When I heard about Queer News Tonight, I thought, well, that name must be synonymous with broadcasting excellence. So I'm shocked by the mediocre quality of that report. But in any case, so this was supposed to be the big international Pride event. They only do it once every 2 years. Organizers were expecting a lot of pent-up demand. They thought it'd be a huge turnout. And instead, they got 1/3 of the crowd they expected, which, again, hilarious and great. But what is the reason they offer? Well, what's the real reason for this? We know the real reason, as we've talked about, is that the Pride movement, so-called, the quote-unquote gay rights movement, the LGBT movement, whatever label you want to put on it, is is itself collapsing, and it's been exposed for what it is. People are tired of it. They're fed up with it. They're exhausted by it. And I think a critical mass of people just aren't buying it anymore. And I think probably a critical mass of people never bought it, but pretended to. And so what has really changed over the last 3 or 4 years is that people aren't pretending anymore. They're not acting like they're okay with this. But what do the LGBT activists say? Well, they say it's because all the LGBT activists were scared to come here. It's a fear that keeps them all away. Now, we heard that from the Canadian quote unquote trans woman who said that he didn't want to come to the U.S. because he's scared. And apparently, according to the media and the organizers, that was the prevailing sentiment that led to a reduction in the crowd size by like 70%. Now, never mind the fact that these alleged fears are totally delusional. LGBT people face no threat, no danger in this country at all. That's why they have to make up hate crimes against themselves. Like we talked about last week, they have to invent these hate crimes because actual hate crimes against LGBT people are just not happening, basically non-existent. We've talked before about this with trans-identified people, and we've established that the murder rate for trans people in this country is actually lower than the murder rate for the general population. You are less likely to be killed if you're trans than if you are not trans. That's what the data tells us. So the whole idea that they would be scared of something, it's like a child being scared of the monster under the bed. It's completely imaginary. But that's not even the point. The point to me is that these people are, by their own testimony, total cowards. Just think about the cowardice here. By their own admission, they're absolute cowards. Sure, there's nothing to actually be afraid of, but they supposedly think there's something to be afraid of. And rather than face that fear, and show up and march for their ridiculous cause, they just run away en masse. According to them, 70% of them ran away because they were afraid. And that's what you notice about LGBT activists. Of their many vices, cowardice is up at the top. They're constantly talking about how scared they are. There's no group of people on earth, especially no group of political extremists, have ever been as scared as LGBT activists constantly are. And they're constantly telling us how afraid they are all the time of everything. Just the most fearful, scared people on the planet. And they don't face their fears. They don't fight on in spite of their fears. No, they just run away. They hide. At the slightest hint of any possible pushback, they run for the hills. An amazing level of cowardice. And why is that? Well, it's because LGBT pride, so-called, is not a real cause. It's not a real movement. It is an expression of self-centeredness. I mean, that's what pride is. It's right there in the name. It's pride, narcissism, self-obsession. That's all it is. And of course, people are not willing to put anything on the line for the sake of selfishness. Risking your life, or risking it in your imagination anyway, for the sake of selfishness would defeat the whole purpose. So they're not willing to do that. And we get this just totally cowardly display. All right, and compare that, by the way, to other groups of activists, say like pro-lifers, for example. Pro-lifers during the Biden administration actually had something to be afraid of, actually had something to worry about, because the Biden administration was going around and arresting pro-lifers and throwing them in federal prison, sometimes for years at a time. Okay, that's not happening to LGBT activists. There's no campaign to go round these people up and throw them in prison. Even though many of them do commit crimes, and in that case they should be rounded up and thrown in prison, but there's no campaign to do that. The Trump administration isn't doing that. It was actually happening to pro-lifers. And yet pro-life activists, they didn't stop their pro-life activism. You know, they still showed up for the March for Life every single year. They didn't all run home and hide under their beds. That's actual courage. But that's what you expect to see, because pro-lifers, like, what is the pro-life movement? They're speaking up not for themselves, but for someone else. That's there's no denying that. Even if you're pro-abortion, even if you hate pro-lifers, you can't reasonably deny the fact that pro-lifers are in it because they want to protect babies. Like, they don't benefit from this personally. A pro-life activist doesn't have anything personally at stake. They're not threatened by abortion laws because they've already been born. So they're there for someone else. And when you're motivated to protect someone else, that already requires a certain amount of moral courage and fortitude. And so it's no surprise to see pro-life activists acting with courage. But LGBT activists are in it for themselves, like, admittedly so. Admittedly, again, it's in they're in the name and pride, but they are marching for the sake of their own ability to act however they want in public and dance around naked in public and all that kind of stuff. So it is all naturally very self-centered. And when you have a self-centered movement, you're not going to find the kind of courage and selflessness that you find in these real political movements like the pro-life movement. All right, here's or I should say, a real civil rights movement is the pro-life movement. I mean, they're both political movements, but the pro-life movement is a real civil rights movement, whereas the LGBT pride movement is not. All right, here's a fun story with a happy ending. There's a popular account, was a popular account on X called LA Scanner, and it's a leftist account. And during the LA riots over the past few days, this account started posting information about ICE raids. And then it also started posting information about where ICE agents could be found. And I'm not going to put any of this screenshots up on the screen, obviously, because I don't want to spread any of this information. But as one example, he somehow found out about a hotel where some ICE agents were allegedly staying. And he posted the hotel with the exact address. And he was also posting home addresses and so on and so on. Why was he doing this? Well, obviously, he was hoping that violent mobs would show up where these people were living and sleeping and accost or assault them. I mean, why else would you post that information? There's no other reason to post it. So now for the happy ending. Apparently, some of the good folks on X didn't take very kindly to this, and so they decided to fight back, fight fire with fire, and they found out who was behind this anonymous LA Scanner account, and they posted his personal information. They also reported him to law enforcement because what he was doing was obviously highly illegal on several different levels. And soon the guy behind the account, named Jack Quillen, was forced to issue a public apology and delete his entire account and announce that he will turn himself in to law enforcement. And it was also revealed that this guy is a convicted felon. He was convicted of stalking, so no big surprise there. But he had to issue this apology. I'll read the apology that he issued. He said, "I want to issue a formal apology. I should not have posted the information or the locations of ICE raids, and I will no longer do so. I've contacted the authorities to take responsibility, and they are currently reviewing my account to determine if any laws were broken. If it's found that I violated the law, I will cooperate fully and turn myself in. To those targeting my family, please, I'm begging you to stop. They've done nothing wrong and do not deserve to be dragged into this. The anger should be directed at me, not them. Someone's already come to my home, pounding on my door and demanding to confront me. This has gone too far. To anyone I may have put at risk, I sincerely apologize. This was never my intention." It's gone too far. Now that people are coming to his home and pounding on his door, wanting to confront him, it's gone too far. He was trying to send mobs to the homes and locations of ICE agents so that they would do the exact same thing to those ICE agents. That's not going too far. It's going too far when it happens to him. So that was the apology. And if you're wondering what this guy looks like, here's a video that he posted on a different account unrelated to the doxing story. I guess this was a video posted at some point earlier, and the journalist Colin Rugg reposted this. But I just want to play it just so you can see what this guy looks like and sounds like. This is apparently Jack Quillen. Here it is. Watch.
The U.S. Secret Service confirmed visiting a Southside school as part of an investigation into a threat. Initially, Chicago Public Schools, or CPS, reported that the agents were from the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. But ICE denied involvement. The Secret Service agent said that they were directed to Hamline Elementary School after visiting a home, but did not enter the school.
So, of course, he looks like that. He looks exactly as you would expect. Another tough-talking, anonymous account run by a guy who looks like a melting snowman. And no disrespect to him. I don't say that as an insult, of course. It's really just a medical observation. I'm actually concerned about him. I'm concerned he might have some real medical issues, legal issues too, but he might have medical issues also. Because I don't think a person isn't supposed to look, like that. But and this story only goes to show that the only thing that works, the only thing that stops this kind of behavior, the only thing is consequence. There must be consequences, punishment. It's the only thing that matters, the only thing these people respond to. This guy was doxing law enforcement officers, and then he got doxed. And now he's learned his lesson. I can't think of any other way that it would be learned other than him also going to prison, which hopefully he does. But the thing is that the right for a long time has been hung up on this idea that we can't stoop to their level. We must not stoop to their level. Well, okay, then we'll just lose, I guess, in that case. Because that's the other option. If you won't fight them on their level, you will lose on their level. It's like, think of it like leverage in sports, in football. In the trenches, at the line of scrimmage, the lowest man wins. If you're on the offensive line and the defensive tackle across from you gets lower than you do, you're going to lose that battle. You're going to get bowled over, and he's going to go sack the quarterback. So you can't stand there and say, I'm not going to stoop to his level. I refuse. That's a good way to get knocked on your ass. And I think metaphorically, a similar thing has happened culturally and politically, where the right didn't want to get as low as the left was getting, and so we just got bowled over. Now, I'm not saying that we should abandon our morals, abandon our dignity. I'm not arguing for any kind of moral relativism. That's not it at all. But responding with proportional force and proportional tactics is not abandoning morals. A guy was doxing ICE agents and trying to get them killed. He got doxed by other people. That feels pretty proportional. And that's the only way that this stops. That's the only thing that they'll respond to. And we're seeing this that goes for all these rioters. We talked yesterday. There was the clip of a rioter. In fact, it's not just one clip. There are many rioters doing this, but one clip in particular of a guy that was throwing rocks, like good size, big rocks, at vehicles that were moving at high rates of speed. Now you could kill someone doing that very easily. People have died that way. There are many cases of people dying from rocks being thrown at vehicles. This is like a relatively common thing. We've seen many cases of it. So, the update today is that law enforcement, they're looking for this guy. They've identified him. Apparently he was like a 40-year-old guy. Okay. This wasn't even a teenager out there doing this. And even if it was, they still should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. This was an adult man, a guy older than me out there doing this. And law enforcement's looking for him. It's good that they're looking for him. I assume they're going to find him. But the next step is that guy needs to go to prison for a long time. That's proportional. That is justice. Okay, a proportional response is you go find that guy, find any rioter who threw any kind of object, any kind of potentially lethal object. There's a brick, a cinder block, a rock. Any rioter who threw any kind of potentially lethal object, find every single one of them and throw them in prison. Prosecute them as attempted murderers, because that's what all of them are, and throw them in prison for a very long time. Like, your life is ruined. You find those people, you put them in handcuffs, and you say to them, your life is ruined now. You've just ruined your life. Your life is never going to be the same. And you've ruined your entire life. You're going to live the rest of your life every single day. When you wake up, you're going to regret your decision to do that. You threw that rock at that cop. You threw it at a car. Every day for the rest of your life, for as long as you live, you're going to wake up, and the first thing you're going to think is that you wish you hadn't done that. And there's not going to be any respite. It's not going to change. You're not getting out of it. There will be no mercy. You can apologize and cry all you want. Doesn't matter. Sorry, your life is ruined. You did that to yourself. You respond that way enough times to enough people, and that's how you see a restoration of a basic sense of order and dignity in our society. And there's just no other way to do it. All right, let's get to the comment section.
If you're a man, it's required that you grow a beard. Hey, we're the sweet baby gang.
What started as an idea is now the podcast and business blasting through your earbuds. Launching your own business is pretty much on everyone's bucket list, but most people let it collect dust right next to learn a language and get abs. Stop hiding behind lame excuses like, I don't have the skills, I can't do it alone. Turn those what ifs into bold why nots with Shopify backing your ideas. They've got the tools. You just need to take the chance. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S. We even use it for our own Daily Wire shop to make sure things are running smoothly and efficiently so you all can get the goods. You might be asking, what if I can't design a website, or I'm worried people haven't heard of my brand? Well, not a problem. Shopify's got you covered from the start with beautiful, ready-to-go templates that match your brand's style and help you find your customers through easy-to-run email and social media campaigns. And if you need a hand with everyday tasks, their AI tools created specifically for commerce can help enhance product images, write descriptions, and more. Plus, their award-winning customer support is available 24/7 to share advice if you ever get stuck. Turn those dreams into and give them the best shot at success with Shopify. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/Walsh. Go to shopify.com/Walsh, shopify.com/Walsh. The sign saying no one is illegal on stolen land is absolutely ridiculous. All land everywhere on earth has been conquered at one point or another. The delusion of what human history actually is baffling. Yeah, I agree. Obviously, we're going to deal with this a little bit more into cancellation, but this is why I hammer on this point so often. It's astounding, the level of historical ignorance that most people carry around every day. No appreciation or understanding of how the world works, how it was shaped, how it was formed. And of course, you're tempted to say that this is a failure of the public school system, but it actually isn't. I mean, this is actually a testament to the success of the public school system, because the system has done what it intended to do. It's not like the education system is trying to instill a true historical understanding in its students and somehow failing, you know. No, it's trying to give kids a cloudy, undefined sort of fantasy version of history. And it's succeeding. Because the more you sever somebody from their true history, from their true legacy, their true ancestry, the more you can manipulate them and mold them in the present. And that's the game, and that's what they're doing. Matt, you're totally wrong about Mexican food. If you're looking for the overrated ethnic cuisine, it's Indian food. Well, you're wrong about that. Indian food is great. I don't care what anyone says. Butter chicken with rice and some naan bread. One of my favorite dishes of all time. And it is, I'm sorry. It is better than Mexican food. And I never said Mexican food. It's a lot of people outraged by my take on Mexican food. I never said it was bad. I don't think it's bad. I'll eat a taco. Yeah. No one hates Mexican food. How could you hate it? It's like hating pizza or something. It's good. It's just, it's a bit overrated. But more importantly, the idea that we need unchecked Mexican immigration into the country in order to make Mexican food is obviously ridiculous. Anybody could make, you know what? I can make a better taco personally than like 90% of tacos that you'd find in Mexico. I'll tell you that right now. I make a damn good taco, which is not a huge accomplishment because they're pretty easy to make. Which is good. You know, that's a mark of a good food if it's easy to make. Okay, another one says, are we gonna mention the pallets of cinder blocks being dropped off outside of the ICE facility? Well, of course. I mean, none of this is organic. It never is. That's why these riots happen right on schedule. You can predict them. Like going into the summer, we have more riots. Not a coincidence. It doesn't just work out this way by happenstance. These are being funded, coordinated, organized. That is always obvious. It's never been more obvious than it is right now in this case, because this is supposedly in response to ICE raids. Like, how do all these people even know that this was happening? I mean, from if you took the news at face value, you would think that there were just armies, entire battalions of ICE agents rolling up in like tanks, and just you look through the street and you just see Mexicans being dragged through the street, thrown into buses, and you imagine this incredible scene that was unfolding, and then people erupted in outrage organically in response to it. That is not what was happening at all. Okay, the vast majority of people in Los Angeles, almost all of them, would not have even noticed that there were any ICE raids happening or even really known about it, which is a pretty good indication that this was not an organic, emotional reaction to the scene that was unfolding. This was all coordinated and funded, and that could not be more clear. Simone Biles has never been forced to compete against a man, so she needs to shut it. Yeah, a lot of people have made this point, and it's true, but it kind of understates the case a little bit, because not only has Simone Biles not had to compete against men, but she is in one of the most rigidly sex-segregated sports in existence. Because, as far as I know, and I'm no gymnastics expert, but not only are men and women separated, but they don't even do the same events. So it's not even just that men and women are separated and they compete separately. It's the events themselves are different. I think there are a couple of gymnastic events that both men and women do separately, like, floor exercises or whatever, but most of them are different. And as far as I'm aware, Simone Biles has never complained about that. She's never insisted that men and women should do the same events or that the sexes should be mixed or anything like that. She quite enjoys that level of sex segregation. Finally, I never have liked Simone. She made me not want to watch gymnastics ever again after she was losing and huffed out of the Olympics like a 3-year-old who hated losing and then blamed mental health. Please, she threw a temper tantrum and stormed off. We all saw it. Yes, quitting at the Olympics is one of the most disgraceful and cowardly things I've ever seen in sports. Actually, it's the most disgraceful and cowardly thing I've ever seen in sports, easily. And the pathetic thing is that so many people on the left and right were defending her at the time, which ironically is also an advantage that she enjoys because she's a woman. There's another example of sex segregation in sports in a way, because there's no way in hell that anyone would be defending, much less celebrating, a male athlete who quit because of his mental health. Imagine an NBA player who quit in the middle of the finals because he needs to work on his mental health. Imagine the star player on the court in the NBA. It's the NBA finals, and halfway through the second quarter on the first day, game one, he just leaves and says, I'm not really in the place I need to be mentally. I got to get my mind right. I'm not in the right headspace right now. If he did that, he would be widely excoriated, denounced, mocked forever by everyone, and rightly so. But Simone Biles was greeted with understanding, and even people applauding her for quitting. And that's because she's a woman. I mean, it's only a woman could be applauded under those circumstances. But the truth is that quitting because something is difficult or because there's too much pressure, quitting especially when people are depending on you, is one of the most detestable things a person can do. It's the kind of thing, you say it's like a 3-year-old, and you're right, like that's the kind of thing we only tolerate in children. And even then, we don't, you accept that children will behave that way, but you don't really tolerate it. You teach them otherwise. Okay, I won't even let my kids quit in the middle of a board game. I won't let my 8-year-old quit in the middle of Monopoly because he's losing. And trust me, he's tried many times. But I tell him, you're going to sit here and we're going to finish this game. It's going to be 7.5 hours more, and you're going to sit here and we're going to finish. Because when you start something, you finish it, and you don't quit because you're losing. We don't accept that. That's not the kind of person that you're going to be. And you teach that to children, and yet this was a grown woman who did the exact same thing during the Olympics. So she deserves to be forever disgraced and shunned because of that alone, let alone what she has, how she's conducted herself afterwards. This month, Tax Network USA proudly celebrates our nation's birthday, honoring freedom, resilience, and financial independence. To mark the occasion, they're offering 10% off all services through July 4th. If you're dealing with back taxes or missed the April 15th deadline, don't wait. The IRS is rapidly stepping up enforcement. Penalties can add up quickly, up to 5% per month, maxing out at 25% of your total tax bill just for not filing. And that's on top of what you already owe. But there's good news. Tax Network USA can still help you turn things around. Whether you're self-employed, run a business, or your books are a complete mess, their team knows how to cut through the chaos and find solutions that work. Your consultation is always free, and getting ahead of the problem now could help you avoid harsh penalties, wage garnishments, or surprise bank levies. Take the first step. Call 800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/Walsh. And don't forget, you'll get 10% off all services through July 4th as part of their celebration of our nation's birthday. Regain control of your finances with expert help from Tax Network USA. Your dad raised you with common sense. Now give him a full year of it with Daily Wire Plus. Time is running out to get 40% off at Daily Wire Plus with a Daily Wire Plus gift membership with code DAD40. That includes ad-free, uncensored shows from the most trusted voices in conservative media, plus hit titles like Am I Racist and Dr. Jordan P. Peterson's new series, Parenting, streaming exclusively on Daily Wire Plus. Go to dailywire.com/gift and make Father's Day great again. Now let's get to our daily cancellation. As we briefly talked about in the open, we're hearing several different alleged justifications for the ongoing riots in Los Angeles. They're blaming the National Guard, even though the National Guard hasn't done anything at this point. They're blaming ICE, even though ICE is just enforcing the law. But all these excuses, as pathetic as they may be, pale in comparison to the mother of all rationalizations that's emerged in the days since the mayhem began. I'm talking about the claim, which I've seen repeated over and over again, that California used to be a part of Mexico. And the idea is that because California was supposedly stolen from Mexico, the insurrection is justified. To give just one example of how this argument looks, here's a demonstrator in Los Angeles. This was recorded by Nick Shirley, who's been shooting a lot of firsthand footage from the riots. And watch this.
This is our city, and this was Mexico. You can't kick us out of the land that was ours. Donald Trump! Donald Trump! Fascism! Let our people free! Let our people free! ¡Nuestra gente! Let our people free! Let our people free! ¡Suelta nuestra gente! Let our people free!
What's the windblower for?
Just for the tear gas to blow it back at those men. If you have a blower, bring it out!
Now, before we engage with the substance of this person's argument, we need to address the last part of that clip. It turns out that as these riots continue, there's a lot of footage of these people using leaf blowers to fight back against the tear gas, which honestly seems like something out of a Babylon Bee article. It's just a little bit too on the nose. This is a riot led by Hispanic migrants, and the first thing they grab when they riot is lawn equipment. And because it's California, they're not gas leaf blowers, they're electric. And they really think it's going to work, even though it doesn't seem particularly effective. Here's one demonstration of these electric leaf blowers in action. As you can see, contrary to the rioters' expectation, the battery-powered lawn equipment isn't really doing the trick. It's yet another reason, as if we needed it, to doubt the intellectual firepower that these rioters are bringing to the table. But in any event, there have been a lot more people making the argument that California is really a part of Mexico. It's not just the one very large woman with a leaf blower. There's been many conversations where this is coming up. For example, the former Braves pitcher John Rocker, who's known for speaking his mind, wrote on social media, quote, "If you're waving a Mexico flag, you belong in Mexico." And which of course is true. And in response, a self-described comedian living in Los Angeles named Jake Flores wrote, quote, "I am in Mexico." Now, he also posted this map showing Mexico's greatly expanded borders, followed by the message, "Triggered yet?" Collectively, these posts racked up more than 13 million views, so we can conclude that indeed a lot of people hold the opinion that California is, rightfully, a property of Mexico. And at first I was tempted to ignore all of this stupidity because it's just a bunch of posts on social media, but mainstream media outlets are repeating this narrative, even though it's obviously false. CNN, for example, just interviewed a former Univision anchor, and here's what she said.
I'm from LA. I was born in LA. That's where my roots are. That's where I started my career. It is almost 50% Hispanic. Remember that California was part of Mexico. All of the Southwest is Mexico. So the roots are really deep in that region. And what they're saying is, no, not in our community. Because when they're coming in, even though there's second, third, fourth, fifth generation Latinos that live there, Mexican Americans that live there, some of them might be their family members. The people that they're going after, it's personal for them because they're going after their cousin and their uncle and their parents. And how does that make us safe?
Okay, so let's just review a little bit of history here. California was claimed as a colonial property of Spain in the 1500s. Mexico did not exist as an independent country until August of 1821, when they negotiated their independence from Spain. For the 300 years before that, it was Spanish territory. So when they say that California belongs to Mexico, they really mean that it belongs to the European nation of Spain. Before the Spanish, Mexico was the province of the bloodthirsty Aztecs who enjoyed ripping the still beating hearts out of children's chests. And before that, some other barbaric tribe controlled the land. And that's, basically, in a few sentences, the history of Mexico. Mexico, as an independent nation, owned California for a period of about 25 years before they lost the Mexican-American War and consequently California. And they lost that war in just 2 years, so it wasn't much of a fight. By contrast, California has, so just to review again, California belonged to Spain for about 300 years. And then it belonged to Mexico as an independent nation for a couple of decades. And then it belonged to the United States for, at this point, around 175 years. In other words, California has been U.S. territory for 7 times longer than it was Mexican. And it was only Mexican because they briefly inherited it from the Spanish Empire. And it should also be noted that neither the Spanish nor the Mexicans ever did anything with California. Now, they planted a few missions here and there, which is good. But other than that, before Americans got involved, it was a sparsely populated wilderness. The only reason why California is a desirable place to go right now, and it's becoming less and less desirable because of all the immigration, but if it was ever a desirable place to go, it's only because of the United States of America. And to illustrate that point, guess what the population of Los Angeles was in 1850, shortly after California became part of America? There were around 1,600 people total. All of Los Angeles County had something like 3,000 people. It was a small and irrelevant town. Its potential was completely untapped. Now, by 1900, just 50 years after the United States took control, the population had increased to 100,000. And then 50 years after that, just a century after the U.S. took control, Los Angeles' population had boomed to nearly 2 million people. Half of the population of the entire state of California lived in Los Angeles. And it was mostly white people who lived there at the time. So, in other words, Americans, and specifically predominantly white Americans, built Los Angeles into one of the most important cities in the entire world. That's the fact. And they did the same thing to the rest of California. In San Francisco, for example, the population was around 35,000 in 1850. Again, it was effectively a small town. By 1950, the population of San Francisco had increased by more than 2,000% to 775,000. And again, at the time, it was mostly white. Now, there really is no way to argue this point. California is California because of the United States. Anything good that can be said about California as a place to live is the direct consequence of the United States winning possession of it. Mexico, meanwhile, has not become a great nation or even a functional one for the most part after independence. And if somehow you're still not convinced by this fact, as obvious as it is, consider this. The United States was winning world wars 140 years after declaring its independence, which is a very, very short period of time to go from becoming independent to being a world power. By contrast, 140 years after their independence, Mexico became a narco state. The drug cartels took over the country, and their economy is now dependent on money flowing from the U.S. into Mexico in the form of remittances and drug sales. In fact, their president is currently demanding direct action in the U.S. because of a 3% tax that we're about to impose on those remittances. 3%. That's it. And they can't handle that, which is really embarrassing. And by the way, in case you need more evidence of Mexico's dysfunction and inability to rule over anything, including their own territory, consider the fact that the former emperor of Mexico, Maximilian I, is currently buried in the imperial crypt in Vienna, Austria. Yes, Mexicans allowed themselves to be governed by an Austrian archduke because their country was falling into a state of complete collapse. And then when they decided to murder this archduke, his body was buried 6,000 miles away from Mexico. He ruled from 1864 to 1867 when he was executed for conspiring to overthrow the Mexican government, even though he was running the Mexican government. And just picture a similar situation happening in this country. Imagine if our ruler in 1864, Abe Lincoln, was really an Austrian archduke. And then when he got shot to death, we sent him back to his homeland in Vienna. It would be completely embarrassing and ridiculous. And no one could explain it with a straight face, but that's the history of Mexico. And now we're being told that Mexico is somehow the rightful owner of California. But we all know that if Mexico really did own California, it would be right now even more dysfunctional and violent than it actually is today. That may seem impossible if you've never visited Mexico, but it's the unavoidable truth. That's how truly disastrous Mexico's government is and has been for a very long time. And that is why everybody claiming that the LA riots are justified because California somehow secretly belongs to Mexico is today canceled. That'll do it for the show today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Talk to you tomorrow. Have a great day. Godspeed.
John Bickley here, Daily Wire Editor-in-Chief. Wake up every morning with our show, Morning Wire, where we bring you all the news that you need to know in 15 minutes or less. Join me and my co-host Georgia Howe for daily coverage of all the biggest stories on Morning Wire.